Annotation: New York, Paris, London, Moscow. The name of a socialite, Nadezhda Smirnova, is in the midst of many international scandals. The new tabloid sensation. Who is she? An innocent victim or a dangerous criminal? Continuation of the novel's dangerous travel in The White Queen's Move. Part 1. Party Gold, New York. Our days. Another hot June night was at its height. The canary-yellow disk of the moon hanging in the inky sky was reflected in the greenish waters of the East River and fell on the fancifully curved arches of the George Washington Bridge. Twinkling lights of the billboards lit up the way for the belated passers-by, who were hurrying from the stations of the already shut-down subway to their apartments and townhouses. Luxurious limos were pulling over near the restaurants and nightclubs of the upscale Fifth Avenue. New York was falling asleep after a hard day at work. Lights were going out in the windows, and only the 150 feet glowing crystal of the Statue of Liberty, towering above the great open spaces of the ocean, was still peering into the hazy distance with billions of stars scattered all over it. That summer night, the luxury apartment of one of the top managers of the investment bank Morgan Stanley was filled with a lively buzz of his chatting guests. Manhattan noises are almost never heard here on the 35th floor of the sky-high Trump World Tower located in one of the most desirable neighborhoods of the city. A carelessly dressed young man, utterly out of keeping with the place, was standing by the window overlooking the upper bay, dazzling with the Brooklyn lights. His ruddy tie loosened. He kept his cell phone pressed tightly against his ear, repeating the same phrase anxiously. "Come on, pick it up, come on." His impatient look would change into a mix of fear and irritation whenever any of the guests passed him by, casting an indifferent glance at him. Finally, something clicked in his cell phone and the discontented voice came through. "What the hell?" at 2 a.m., interrupting his interlocutor. The young man covered his mouth with his palm and whispered quietly, "Shut up and listen, Jerry, she's here." "Who's she?" the voice asked with perplexity. "What do you mean, who?" "Smirnova. Damn it," the young man explained impatiently. After a moment's silence, the voice let forth a stream of oaths mixed with ecstatic exclamations. The young man frowned. He was tapping the phone on his lap nonchalantly, waiting for the voice to calm down, and once it did, said, "Are you done? Well, then listen. I wasn't meant to be here. Our old grumbler needs information for this Sunday's issue of the magazine, so he sent me here to talk with Richard Grant. I didn't make it to Grant but half an hour ago I see Smirnova herself come out of the elevator with that manager of hers, you know, good-looking man. My eyes popped out of my head. We've been looking to get hold of her at one of the VIP social events, but here she is. Now they're at Grant's office, talking about something." Another stream of ecstatic exclamations came out of the phone. Interrupting, the young man continued, "I'm calling you. Get the cameraman here. I've captured her on my phone. But you know it's going to be a poor quality. Plus, what if I get to interview her? You never know." The voice responded with a hoarse laughter. "Don't you laugh at me," the young man objected in an injured voice. "She's here with no bodyguards and I don't think Grant would want to force me out. He doesn't need a scandal right now. He has to be nice to the press." The voice fell into silence, skeptically. "All right, I have to go." The young man hurried off. "They're coming out. Come on, get the cameraman here. You can come over if you want to. Well, talk to you later." The young man hurried towards the center of the hall, while passing by a tall, elegantly dressed young woman. He slipped awkwardly and grabbed at her hand, trying not to fall. The woman started and a small purse dropped out of her hands. "My deepest apologies," the young man exclaimed in confusion. He picked up the purse off the parquet floor and, handing it over to the woman, smiled guiltily. "Sorry again. That was embarrassing," he said, her big blue eyes sweeping over the man. She smiled, too. "Don't worry. That's okay." Quote. The woman turned to a broad-shouldered man in a tailcoat with a distinguished Roman profile and a touch of noble grey hair and, apparently continuing their interrupted conversation, asked, "So you think I should accept his offer?" "I think it's risky." "Excuse me," she heard someone say from behind her. The woman turned around. The young man was still standing next to her. "Excuse me," he repeated. "Would it be okay if I asked you for an autograph?" The woman's eyebrows quirked up. "An autograph?" She sounded confused. "Yes, an autograph," the young man exclaimed. "I know you. You're Nadezhda Smirnova. I've read an article about you in Cosmopolitan." The woman frowned discontentedly. "Sir, you must be taking me for someone else." "No way. It's you. I saw your photographs too." The woman exchanged glances with the man she was talking to and, upon receiving a nod of approval from him, uttered in a tired voice, "Okay, you're right. Where do you want me to sign an autograph for you?" The young man pulled a business card out of his pocket swiftly. "Here you are. While signing it." The woman shook her head and looked at the young man satirically. "You're a reporter with the New York Post, and all this show was to just obtain an interview from me." A shy smile appeared on the young man's face again. "Seriously? I feel bad asking you." The woman glanced at the man again. "Well," she sighed, "you've chosen the right time. I'm actually ready to give one." The Crimea. 20 years ago, 4 people were standing on a small square surrounded by a metal fence. Despite the exhausting, hot summer weather, 3 of them wore black coveralls and bulletproof vests trimmed with greenish cloth. The 4th one, a broad-shouldered middle-aged man with a face tanned to a deep brown, had a combat uniform of the Soviet Army with no badges of rank on. "I want to say it again," the man said in a hoarse low bass. "It's a fight and whatever happens he made a short but, judging by his intonation, very meaningful pause, "are not going to interfere. All you can count on while down there in the bunker is you yourself." He fell silent, took his service cap off his clean-shaven head and wiped his heavily sweating forehead with the back of his hand. His face expression betrayed that it was difficult for him to say those words. He pondered for a moment and said, "You will go to the bunker separately, each following his way. 3 puppets will oppose you, all unarmed. Given that one of you is a woman, we've selected physically weak convicts. It's the first time they take part in a fight like this, so they shouldn't be a problem for you. Questions?" The people in the coveralls looked at each other and one of them, who was probably in charge, a stout man of about 30 years of age, replied loudly and confidently, "The task's clear, Colonel." A woman in her late 20s, good-looking and heavily built with a mass of thick chestnut-colored hair, and a tall, broad-shouldered young man with a face as focused and sullen as that of the colonel kept silent. The colonel shrugged his shoulders, shook hands with all 3 of them and, wishing them good luck, headed briskly to a nearby building. About to go inside, he stopped and turned around, his eyes fixed on the woman. Then he gave a deep sigh and, putting the cap on, disappeared behind an ironclad door. "Let's go," the brunette commanded after the colonel vanished from view. He tried to remain calm, but the tone of his voice betrayed his unease. He pulled a black woolen mask over his face and headed towards the bunker's entrance, trying not to step on pieces of broken glass scattered all over the asphalt. "I go first. You follow me." He passed a remark, switched his torch on and dived into a narrow well manhole, chill and dunk creeping from within. The threesome came down the rusty spiral staircase to find themselves in a scantily lit underground passage. They saw 3 black tunnel entrances at the end of the passage. Pointing his torch at him, the brunette frowned in disgust. "The smell's horrible," he grumbled, taking a sniff and noticing a stream of dark fluid flowing out of the right tunnel. It resembled liquid dung. "Not only do we have to risk our lives, but we also have to get all dirty." He pulled a wry face and looked at the woman. "Which way's yours, Captain?" Looking over the damp, moldy walls of the tunnel, the woman shrugged her shoulders indifferently. "Does it matter which way to go? All tunnels lead to the same end. If you say, I'll take the right one. Unlike you, I'm not afraid of dirt." Upon hearing the woman's reply, the brunette curled his lips. "May I interrupt, Major?" The young man who was standing next to the woman said. "Let me take the right tunnel. You will take the left one, and the captain, she can take the one in the middle. It's safer that way. Let the seniors choose first, Lieutenant. I can take care of myself." The woman said discontentedly and cast a glance at the young man, which clearly revealed that the two were close and had known each other for a long time. "Sure you can," he replied in confusion. "The thing is, when I was there last time, it was dry, while the others were flooded up to the elbows. If you want to take a swim, let's switch." The woman opened her mouth and was about to say something. Judging by her face, she wanted to say something sharp and offensive when the major cut in. "I find the lieutenant's suggestion quite reasonable," he said. "When we get into the bunker, we won't have time to switch places, and you'd better be in between, Captain. Anything can happen in that bunker." The brunette licked his dry lips nervously. "To be honest, I don't like this whole idea with the drill. Nobody notified us about it. And they changed the location and placed as many as 3 puppets in there. Isn't it weird? Well, all right, they know better how to make us a Rambo." He made sure his bulletproof vest was okay, set the mask straight, waved goodbye, bending down, stepped into the left tunnel. "Hold on," the lieutenant whispered and put his hand on the woman's shoulder. She gave him a surprised look and, apparently misinterpreting his gesture, turned away to the wall and replied in a restrained tone, "It's not a good time, Dima. We should meet after the drill and talk everything through." They were standing side by side, almost touching each other. The lieutenant gently hugged the woman around her shoulders and looked in her face. Hatchet, with wide, slightly protruding cheekbones and a pointed cut-off chin, it was hardly pretty, and the only engaging feature was its big eyes with tints of metallic blue and gray. There was some enigmatic magic in them. They were shining from within. The eyes were calling, attracting, luring. He could see wisdom, kindness, and that fortitude in him which only very strong and persistent people have. The lieutenant gazed intently in her face. Then, clenching his teeth, he said as if with an effort, "We may not meet." "Why?" The woman raised her eyebrows. "You both will be killed down there," he replied very quietly. "I've been told the puppets would have the arms." "What are you talking about? Who you?" The woman didn't understand. "You and the major." "And you?" the woman asked in confusion. "You can handle puppets easily, don't you? With or without arms?" The lieutenant's face darkened. "I was ordered not to interfere," he responded, his voice dull with excitement. "And then I have to liquidate the condemned so they don't know where the shanks come from." He read a mute question in the woman's eyes. "They don't trust you anymore. There's no proof of your betrayal other than that video recording. Yet they decided to do away with you without any fuss." The woman looked aside and was silent for a few long minutes. Then she shook her head, gave a sad laugh and whispered, "Maybe it's better this way. I'm so tired of all these inspections questions. I wish it was over soon." Exhausted, she leaned her back against the wall. The lieutenant started, as if her words hit him hard. "Natasha, how can you say that?" he said with pain in his voice. "They've set you up. They use you so the real sleeper in Moscow won't be traced. The woman sighed deeply. Unfortunately, I can't prove it, she said sadly, and after a moment's delay asked, okay, I understand why me. But the major, the lieutenant shrugged his shoulders. Hard to say. He's just returned from the States. He brought money there. All right, Dima, the woman waved her hand hopelessly. If that's what they want, we're powerless. We both know that. She took a mask from the lieutenant's hands, pulled it over her head and, readjusting the straps of her bulletproof vest, slipped into the darkness of the tunnel. Following her with his eyes, the lieutenant sank slowly on the floor, his back pressed against the ice-cold wall. His shoulders and hands were trembling. He was sitting there motionless for a minute or two. Then, pulling himself together, he got up to his knees and crawled to the right tunnel. As he lifted the floor slab and cautiously looked in, he realized everything was over. Standing on their knees, two young men with necks as strong as an ox were searching the major's bloody body. The third one, an aging, balding man who was apparently older than his fellow convicts, holding a short awl-like knife at the woman's throat, was trying to take the torn, blood-stained coverall off her. His hands were shaking and he had trouble unfastening the small buttons on her waist. The woman was wheezing and barely resisted him, perhaps drained of strength by her lacerated wound. The lieutenant forced the slab aside, jumped into the bunker and froze, his eyes fixed on the woman's face. Unlike the two other tunnels, the tunnel he was crawling in had an exit not in the bunker's side wall, but on its bottom, so his emergence was sudden. "Ha! Look, we've got another visitor!" one of the convicts exclaimed in amazement, seeing the lieutenant. He picked up a bloody shank off the floor and, playing with it, walked towards him. "You go on. I can take care of him myself," he said to the man who had jumped up to follow him. "You know all good things come in threes." Shuffling up to the lieutenant, the man wiped the blade on a greasy sleeve of his tarpaulin jacket. It was reddish-black with blood. Then, screwing up his eyes, he glanced over him with contempt. "Well, boy," he croaked, grinning, "you've shitted yourself already. Don't be scared. You'll be dead with one stroke. You won't suffer long," to the approving jeers of his friends. He took a step forward, crouched, and turning his body sharply round, jerked his hand with the shank up archwise. He did not kill anybody with one strike, nor did he with two. His opponent bent down and, when the hand with the shank swept over his head like a storm, caught it by the elbow swiftly, swung his arm, and hit him on his lower jaw. The convict's head twitched, opening up his Adam's apple and chin covered with red bristles. He staggered and started falling backwards, but his opponent did not let him fall. He brought his right hand to his hip, breathed out sharply, and pierced the convict's belly with his stretched fingertips, almost the whole palm plunged inside. Red blood started spouting like a fountain from the wound, staining the walls and the floor of the bunker. The puppet turned white, his mouth was open. He staggered and, pressing his ripped-up stomach with his bloody fingers, began sinking slowly on the floor. The death agony lasted a few seconds. Then his body stretched in a convulsion, splashing the pool of blood on the walls, as if saying its farewells to the life which was abandoning it, and quietened down forever. "What the hell?" a disturbed voice broke the silence. "Hey, bugger, that bitch's knocked valet off." The convict, who was sitting near the major's dead body, sprung to his feet. "I see." The balding convict cast a long glance at the lieutenant and ordered in an unassured voice, "Boobin, take the iceman. But be careful, you see, the bastard's kicking." The second convict approached the lieutenant with less confidence. Throwing the shank from one hand to the other nervously, he stopped about 2 steps away from him. His opponent was standing still, smiling contemptuously. He was staring in his face. Finally, Bugor lost his patience. "What the F*** Boobin," he said, lisping and swallowing his words. "If you haven't shitted yourself yet, go relieve yourself. You embarrass me. What was I teaching you?" Bugor spitted in the corner angrily. Upon hearing those words, Boobin began flaring up, until he got up enough nerve and threw himself forward. With a loud cry, he made a maneuver and, drawing a wide arch in the air with his shank, he stabbed the lieutenant in the stomach as hard as he could. His enemy's shadow flashed just a few inches from the deadly blade, and he even felt it penetrating something soft and shapeless. He barked cheerfully, yes, but had to cut his exclamation short, as he saw the shank piercing only a bit of the soiled coverall. Suddenly, his hand hung in mid-air helplessly. He tottered on the floor, which was sticky and slippery with blood. Losing his balance, he almost fell down. A hard slap across his face stopped his body from falling. For a moment, he saw a bright light flash, and then, with his arms spread out, he collapsed on the wall. The convict was unconscious for a second or two. He got up, even though he was weak in the knees. When his dizziness passed and the lieutenant's face stopped being blurred, he rushed forward again. This time he managed to come up to his enemy. The lieutenant crouched abruptly and knocked the convict down with his foot. "Watch out, bitch. I'm coming for you," the convict croaked, getting up from the floor, his heart overflown with rage. Waving his shank, he rushed towards the lieutenant again. His hand slipped up. The same moment the lieutenant grabbed it and the convict fell down like a ninepin. His elbow joint cracked, tearing the tendons. "Aar!" The heart-ending scream rent the air in the bunker. The lieutenant picked up the shank off the floor and in a jerk pierced the convict's hip. Twisted by an intolerable pain, he screamed so loud that Bugor felt like his ears were stuffed up. "Why you torturing people, bitch?" he shouted loudly and flattened his sweaty back against the bunker wall. Sitting next to the unconscious woman, he held a knife at her throat, feverishly trying to understand what was going on. All their agreements were being broken. That morning, a local boss offered him to stab 2 suckers during a fight in the bunker. This is why they were given 2 shanks and a knife. They were promised a 6-month prolongation to their confinement. Everything was going as planned. However, one of them turned to be a young and rather good-looking girl, which by the way was their jackpot. Convicts rarely get to have anything like that. And suddenly comes a third one, and the chaos begins. The lieutenant threw the shank aside and came up to Bugor. "Your stooge is a dead man anyway," he said quietly. "But we can talk face to face without witnesses." "Witnesses? Seriously?" Bugor glanced over the bunker like a haunted beast at bay. "Audibility's good here," the lieutenant explained and nodded towards the tunnels. He glowered at the convict for a while, then readjusted his mask and said, "I have an offer. I'm not going to have anything to do with you bitches anymore." Bugor's face became all red. "You finished off all my buddies." The lieutenant smiled ruefully. "I can't help it. Rules are rules. Who knows a lot doesn't live long. What do we have to do with this?" Bugor was perplexed. The lieutenant shrugged his shoulders. "It means you know something you shouldn't." Bugor gave him a look full of hatred. "Go to hell with your secrets." "Calm down," the lieutenant interrupted him. "I guess you've already understood that after you kill those 2 I will kill you. So nobody finds out where the shanks came from." "But I don't want her to die." The lieutenant nodded towards the unconscious woman. Bugor grinned scornfully. "Your chick. It's not about it." The lieutenant frowned. "I owe her. She saved my life once and I always pay my debts." He glanced at the convict who was lying by the wall. His cries were not as loud and he started to faint. "We don't have much time," the lieutenant warned. "So, here's my offer. I want to exchange a life for a life. You don't touch her and I don't touch you. Agreed. Bagor scratched his unshaven chin. Aren't you afraid that your bosses won't be happy about it? He asked with a grin after a long pause. The lieutenant winced. No, I'm not. It's my problem. It's up to you. If you agree, you'll live another half a year. If you don't, he cast at Bagor a look which boded nothing good. You won't get out of here alive and will be dying slowly. Longer than them. The lieutenant pointed at the wall premortal moans were coming from. A long silence fell upon the room. Why would I want to live such a life? Bagor said, spitting on the bloody floor with disdain. If not today, in half a year your buddies will finish me off. And maybe use torture. And this woman of yours must be guilty of something if they want her dead. The lieutenant became gloomy. She's not guilty of anything, he said with sorrow in his voice. She's been set up by someone more powerful, and you don't know what your future will be. The country's a mess right now, and as far as I know you've got a death penalty for an economic crime. Maybe you'll avoid brilliant green on your forehead. The lieutenant looked intently in the convict's eyes again, and once the latter lowered his knife, hit him on his temple with the side of his hand, making sure the blow was hard but not fatal.